book Against Method, Paul Feyerabend kind of states, and when I say kind of, that means that's my interpretation, this is not quote, that the purpose of science is to proliferate. And what that means is that science, like everything else in life, really doesn't have some higher value or anything like that. Its main goal is to proliferate the same way humans proliferate by reproduction and all that. And the interesting question, of course, is not does science proliferate or not, because that's kind of a self-evident. What's really interesting is what are the vectors that science is using to proliferate, and that's kind of where we get into the conversation of, okay, what is it actually? What is science? What is method? And that's what Paul Feyerabend discusses in his book. I'm reading Paul Feyerabend's book, so it's a long read for me. It's not a very big book, but it's one of those books that I don't read. I read books in different ways. Like sometimes I read a book through, let's say, novels, typically. Grapes of Wrath recently I read just through, like everybody else, I pick it up, I read it. I'm reading Open Society and Its Enemies by Karl Popper, same way. Then I have books like the biography of Giacometti that I've been reading now for about 6 months. I take my time, I read a few pages, then I read maybe a few more, and then I don't read for a while, that kind of thing. And this is how I read Paul Feyerabend's book. So I want to discuss today this idea that I found in the book, or more an explanation of what science is. Its purpose is to proliferate. It helps me understand and kind of goes into similar conversations like in my previous episode today about tokenomics and the idea of how to design something so it proliferates in a good way. And I think science has found a way to proliferate, and it almost has to be in a good way, because otherwise it wouldn't be around. This is not even on podcast. It's May 8, 2022. This is Krimdelko. This is the second episode today. It's Sunday. There's no update. We're down 28.3%. Markets down 13.8%, and we're underperforming by 14.5%. So the purpose of science is to proliferate. Now the question, again, the interesting question is, what does it take for science to proliferate? And certainly it has to have utility for us. If we think about science, there are areas that I would put in the same sphere, like art or religion. They all have certain utility, I think. And you could think of them like almost like in a Darwinian evolutionary context. They come up and they survive in the biotope, in our minds. In this case, the biotope is our minds. Science is not something tangible. Religion is not something tangible. Art is not something tangible. It's not the Golden Gate Bridge or a machine, but it instantiates certain types of thinking in people, and that proliferates through people's brains and keeps science alive. Now, of course, we have to discuss what is science also in the context of who does science. And the people who do science are scientists. And part of the reason for science to survive as a thing is, of course, that the scientists find utility in doing it. So, for example, if you do sorcery today, you will have trouble surviving. People will not give you resources like they did maybe during the Viking times. Science, on the other hand, you get resources. So science has found a way to proliferate by instantiating itself in the brains of people and societies accept it, and they also provide the people who do it with resources. And the reason they do that is because scientists can produce ideas that end up producing weapons. I think that's in my very narrow view of the world. I think this is the main reason why science is successful, because it helps people produce weapons. There's other things, auxiliary benefits, such as bridges, cars, and all stuff like that, which we could argue can be used for war also. But it's not just that. I mean, of course, let's say if we take quantum computing as a good example. Quantum computing has gotten a boost because there's the concept of quantum cryptography, which goes back to science, and scientists who are good at quantum cryptography are really sought after. A lot of them are, let's say, in stealth mode and funded by the DoD here and in China by their version of the DoD and so on and so forth. So what I'm trying to say here is that we have science, let's say quantum computing as an example, which was maybe considered something not very useful because there was no tangible benefit. And the people in the science community were navigating towards other areas, such as, of course, nuclear physics and things like that to make atomic bombs. And then maybe most recently, if you're a scientist that can build a self-driving robot that can shoot people, I'm sure you will find funding. But the quantum computing did not get funding until quantum cryptography came to the scene, and all the discussions also about things like satellite quantum cryptography. So I don't want to go into details now what that is, but the point here is that there's a defense, or there's a weapon, and in particular communication is often even more important than weapons when it comes to war. If you can have solutions that drive communication, that help you fight wars, then you will find funding, and therefore science proliferates by allowing societies to create weapons and also communication tools to fight wars. This is certainly, I would say, one of the main reasons why science is so successful. If we go back to the ideas of what science is, and I'm reading Karl Popper's Open Society and its Enemies, and Popper distinguishes between, in the first parts of the book, he talks about the Greek philosophers and the ideas where the Western ideas come from. And the idea of science in Athens was a little bit suppressed and it yielded to other ideas such as music and arts, versus in Sparta, science was considered the main thing because Sparta was a Spartan society, as we use today as a metaphor. And what that means is it was a society which was primarily functioning as the purpose of Sparta was to fight wars, win wars, or at least defend against intruders. So Sparta was very similar to the Soviet Union, where scientists were elevated to a very high pedestal because they proliferated weapons, they produced weapons for the society. And I think if we take that analogy today, we could say Russia and the former Soviet Union and today's Russia are Sparta, and we are Athens, because we spend a lot of time for other ideas, free speech and freedom and all that stuff. And the question now is, of course, well, are we doomed like Athens? Or, in other words, why aren't we putting scientists on a high pedestal? And another question I have, inspired by Fire Robin's book, is, well, if the purpose of science is proliferate, so why is it not proliferating as fast or as efficiently here versus, let's say, China? At least we have this idea, of this impression that science is proliferating much faster in China than here. People do STEM education, the kids are obsessed with math and all that, and here they're not. Why is that happening? And there's two explanations to that. One is that we're lazy, we're just complacent, or the explanation could also be that maybe in our society, science is not on such high pedestal, because when the sole purpose of science becomes to make weapons, then we kind of lose interest, because there's also marginal utility to weapons. How many more atomic bombs can you build? How many crypto assets can you have, and all that? Now, that's of course a dangerous argument, because with weapons, it's kind of like with car thieves. Yes, maybe it's not interesting to build the nth atomic bomb, but you also have to be on your toes, because you never know what's next around the corner, and you don't want to be surprised by the next technology that then allows the car thief to steal your car. So you want to be ahead of the car thief, in other words. Therefore, again, the question is legitimate. Are we just lazy, or are we not seeing the value in science because science itself has this tendency to degenerate into a complacent state? And this is a good question that I personally believe that science is broken, because science, and the reason I'm reading Fire Robin is because the method of science itself is a norm. It's based on norms. Norms are kind of laws that humans come up with. Norms have the tendency to degenerate in a sense that they don't follow some sort of Darwinian objective, which is survival of the fittest or anything like that. Norms have the tendency to degenerate. I mean, this is Plato in one of his works, where he talks about the degeneration of the state and the degeneration of the human and things like that. And if we really think about this, so we could say, well, look, the the atom of any kind of society, be it the scientific society or political, or the atom's always the human and the family. Humans age, they get older, and therefore they degenerate. So there's let's not go there too much, but the point here is that we have a degenerating culture within science, and science is not delivering. So in other words, what is giving us something. Certainly science is giving us something. Let's not be too crazy. Of course, we're very happy to have it, but the cost or the marginal utility is declining rapidly. There's no way around that. Having said that, now what we're trying to say here is the following. We're trying to say that the purpose of science proliferate. It keeps proliferating, but at a much higher cost in the West. For some reason, it has a better chance in more totalitarian societies. And this is a serious question that I'm asking. I'm asking the question of why is science more successful in the East versus the West? Is this a problem? Is Sparta going to win? Are we going to lose out to the Chinese and the Russians because we're not putting enough resources in science? Or because we're a free society, we're collectively making the choice that science is not that important because it's too expensive? And I think the truth is in the latter. But we still have to be careful because of the car thief thing. Okay, even if it's too expensive, what if they come up with something around the corner that will hurt us? So what's the solution to all this? The solution to all this, in my opinion, is the following. We have to first accept that the purpose of science proliferates. So science proliferates by giving us utility. Is there a way, now this is Popper, can we find socially engineer science in a way that it gets better? Better means it delivers more for less cost. It's too costly now. We have too much hierarchical tendencies. We have too much cost in many ways. Let's say we're wasting time on status. People publish papers because they want to be read by other people instead of publish papers that add value to, let's say, a certain problem, solving problems. Why don't we focus on solving problems? Is that the focus? It's not. Solving problems instead of status, instead of writing papers that others read and all that. How can we engineer that? Again, tokenomics is a solution. I think I'm a bit, I have a hammer now and everything looks like a nail, but I think Web3, if I open my computer, I can make money. If I do science, I can make money. All of a sudden, if I have a Web3 based scientific community, decentralized science, this is the key word here. Not because Web3 is there and we can have these fancy words and all that, but because we can solve problems of trust, we can solve, we can do the MOIT. Monetization, ownership, identity, and trust. All these things can be applied to science as well as to Twitter and any other things. So to summarize, the purpose of science is to proliferate. The question is, why isn't it proliferating as much in the West as it is proliferating in the East, particularly in totalitarian regimes? It's because collectively in the West we have more freedom than in the East, and we decide not to follow the scientific path because it's too expensive, it's not efficient enough. How can we make it more efficient? We can use Web3 technologies to get rid of all the fluff and put more emphasis on problem solving. And we can do this with MOIT, which is another word for we can help people make money in Web3 type, or by having intelligent designs of decentralized science, we can incentivize people, the people who actually contribute to science, to focus more on problem solving and less on status. Thank you.